Hello, thank you very much for tuning in to the Crown of Command. My name's Josh, and this is the very first terrain video tutorial that I'm doing. So I hope you guys enjoy it. We're going to start off very simple, and we're going to start with a Man of War Island. Man of War is a game, of course, released by Games Workshop in the very early 90s, about 91, featuring an epic scale fleet battle system. Okay, welcome everybody to our first modelling workshop video, and we're going to work on some terrain for Man of War using this wonderful 3D printed castle that was sent to me by Marcel from Germany. So thank you very much, Marcel, for doing that, as I had interest in doing some kind of terrain for Man of War involving a castle, but I don't have the like the Mighty Empire's castles they use for the original terrain, and I'm using this kind of foam core type material that I got from Daiso. You can get like 3 sheets for $1 basically, that are easy to cut out and to sand back and that kind of thing. I've also got this blue foam, industrial foam, like insulation foam basically. It's quite high density, but it's easy to cut, and then you can sort of snap off the parts to make your shapes and that kind of thing. So we're just going to make that the foam core is the base, and this sort of high density foam is kind of the island shape. We just want to carve out a shape that we think that's going to be appropriate and it's going to fit our base, and then I'm sort of going to cut it on an angle and then again snap it off, so we've got enough room around the outside to place some rocks and other details. So now I've got the basic sort of shape of our island, and we can see that it's looking pretty good. At this stage we can sort of carve the base of it again on an angle. Be careful not to cut towards yourself, to cut away from yourself with your craft knife, and just to do it out on a bit of a 45 degree angle if you can, and then sort of just go around the edge of the base, and then you'll be able to snap it off to get a nice clean edge. But to make it even smoother, we've got some like really fine sandpaper, and we're just going to sand down those edges as well, just to make it even more smoother. Okay, so we've got a nice smooth edged base, perfect to start off, and then we can go and sort of glue down our top island. I'm going to do that with some PVA glue. Now, of course, I'm in Japan, so all these brand names might be very, very unfamiliar to you, and they're all sort of written in this strange language. But it's basically just PVA glue that we're going to use that. We're just going to spin it around and get some friction there with the glue and the materials, so that it sort of finds a good bond there together, and we'll let that dry. Now you'll see another glue pot on the side of my workbench there. That's actually a plastic glue. And you're probably wondering why we're going to use a plastic glue. Well, I'll show you, because it's going to create this really nice effect. And so if you've got like a Tamiya plastic glue or something with a brush in a bottle, that's probably ideal for this sort of stage. And what we're going to do here, because we're just going to brush it on the very side of the island, so it's going to actually melt the plastic of the foam. And you'll probably find that I'm going to do a lot of these sort of quick time stages just to quicken up the process, because otherwise it'd be a really, really long video. So here you can already see the effects of the glue, and it's actually melted to give this really nice rocky effect. It looks very natural. And you can do this in many different layers if you want more and more of a receding inner part of the island shape, or less, or not at all, or whatever you want to do. It's up to you. I'm going to add a little bit more to the ridges here, just so that they're sort of receding in a little bit, and to give this sort of natural cliff face to the edge of the island. So from here I wanted to make some kind of road or pathway up to the edge of the cliff to access the castle. So with that, I'm just sort of marking out with a pen where I want the area of the pathway to be. Then with a knife, just sort of carving out and shaping some kind of roadway or some kind of pathway to access the top of the island. Okay, so with that done, I want to just see what the castle will look like on top there. I'm pretty happy with that, how it looks. So I think now we're pretty much ready to glue the castle to the top of the cliff face, just doing some PVA glue again, allowing that to dry, and now we've got a much clearer view of what it's going to look like. So now I'm just going to add some PVA glue to the base of the island, and I'm going to use some very, very fine rocks and very fine kind of sand that I purchased from a hobby store. It was like, model railway and that kind of thing. I put my model into a little sandbox type thing, so that will capture all the sand and elements that I'm pouring onto the base. So you can sort of capture all that and put it back into your little package, or save some for later for the next part of the next piece of terrain you're going to make. I'll do the same around the edges of the castle, so it doesn't look like it's been plonked onto the very top, but it's actually formed up with some rocks and that kind of stuff around it, giving a little bit more character and a bit more detail. You can use your brush just to manipulate the rocks and stones around it in the glue, just so that you can place them in areas that you really want to be, if they're not in the exact right place where you need them. So just do that, and just until you think, yep, that's right, that's enough, or I need more, or whatever it might be. But we're going to put some textured paint on here in just a moment anyway, but we want to get that to be dried first. So now you can see it's all dry. Give it a good couple of hours to dry or overnight is even better if you can. And now we're going to get some textured paint. Now this textured paint I've bought from the hardware store. It's actually like an industrial grade, it's kind of like a textured paint they use to put on the outside of walls and that kind of thing. So it will dry absolutely rock hard. It's really good stuff. It's a little bit expensive, but you can use like polyfiller that's really cheap from your hardware store, or you can make it yourself just with some PVA glue and some paint and some sand. Just mix it up. I think that's how they did it back in the day anyway. So it doesn't have to be really expensive, it doesn't have to be really complex. I just use it because it's all sort of ready-made. I'm just going to add some bit of water to it to sort of thin it out. And I'm going to put that all onto my terrain piece on the top and around the base of it. And just so it solidifies everything, so it's going to cover all the rocks. So when that dries, it's going to be absolutely rock hard and nothing's going to come off it, which is what I really wanted to do. Even though, it doesn't have to be really robust or anything like that. It's just nice to have some nice textured areas. Now, when we came to the painting part, I have to apologise because the first part I didn't capture on film, or I think I did, and that just didn't come through on the phone or whatever. But basically, the outside of the rocks and the castle were done in like a dark grey. I used a London grey as a Vallejo model colour for that. Then I added some brown. I used some burnt umber, and I airbrushed that around the edges of the castle and inside some of the parts of the rock face there as well. And then I've just taken some white paint or grey paint, light grey paint. I think I used wolf grey paint from Vallejo, and I've just mixed it with the London grey, and I've just dry brushed around the outside. Now, if you don't have an airbrush, don't panic. You can just do it by hand. It's no problem at all. I'm using, I think it's ivory or elfic flesh from Vallejo model color, game color, and I'm using that as the base of the sand. Okay, on the outside of it. I'm using an airbrush just out of convenience. I mean, I've used it for years for terrain. It's just something that's a really handy tool. But again, if you don't have one, don't go out and buy one if you don't need it necessarily. It's just a really nice handy tool, especially if you're doing lots of terrain. And it's great for doing projects like that. So for the castle itself, I'm just adding some just sort of straight London grey again to the outside of the walls, and I put some wolf grey in there as a mix, 50-50, to get me sort of a nice lighter colour to the outside of the walls of the castle, to sort of highlight it up, which I hope it sort of captures in the filming here. But again, if you don't have an airbrush, you can always dry brush the castle with some lighter grey colours and sort of gradually build it up from there. And once that was done, I sort of lined in on the edges of the castle walls just with some pure wolf grey, which is just a very, very light grey. And so just give more definition to the walls itself, and yeah, just put some give it a bit more highlights, and you just want it to pop on the tabletop a little bit more, or you can leave it darker if you wanted to. That's fine too. It also has these little window slots that I'm going to paint in black in a minute as well. And just to add some extra final details, I'm going to add some brown umber, very thinned out on my palette, really quite watered down, and that's just going to be lined into the sides of the walls, just to add a bit more definition. It just looks nicer that way. So I'm going to line that all across the outside of the walls there of our castle, and around the rocks at the base of the castle too. And finally, we're just going to line in with some black paint on our cannons, because they have to be painted in silver. When it comes to painting the actual very top of the island, it's going to be flocked in green, but before we do that, we're going to paint it in a goblin green. It's a bit of a mix here. I've got whatever paints I've got on my palette at the time. So it's just heavy dark green from Vallejo Model Color and goblin green from Vallejo Model Color, mixed in 50-50, and I'm just going to brush that on the very top and allow that to dry before we get to flock the top of it. And then finally, just to tidy up down the bottom, I'm just going to add some white, and I'm going to just dry brush that along our sort of sandy beach here, just to highlight some more of that area and to cover up any patches. Because the foam core was in sort of a blue-red color, I usually use white, so it's going to sort of stick through there, and I just wanted to cover that up again. And it may require a couple of different layers of paint just to get the right effect that we need. And depending how light or bright you want it, I just want to pick out as many details as I can just to make it again look pretty eye-catching on the tabletop. So I'm going to just dry brush again using some white on the outside of the cliff face. And using some silver paint, we're going to just pick out the cannons on the very top of the castle now. And when we're ready to flock, we do have some JFT1, which is from Javis Countryside Scenics from the UK. Some really good flock. It was actually the same flock they used at Games Workshop Studio. So if you are looking for flock for your tables or terrain, I'd really recommend to check out Javis Scenics, because they do some great products. And also Mel from the Terrain Tutors, Terrainiacs, he uses a lot of their products too, and I found out from their community that this was the same product they used in the stores, and they actually sold it at Games Workshop during the 90s, if you can remember that. And so we're just going to sprinkle it on over the top of our PVA glue, and we're sort of watered down and brushed on with an old brush. And once that's done, we're going to let it dry, and I'm going to show you some other techniques using the airbrush where we can sort of add some warmth to the colours on our already quite detailed and scenic island. Now at this stage you could leave it just as is, but I like to go with the airbrush and then just alter the colours of the flock a little bit, just using some goblin green, just straight goblin green and airbrush. Now of course the paints are from the Vallejo Model Color range and Game Color range, so I'm using the Vallejo paint thinner. It's just a paint thinner that I can just put one drop in with the paint, mix it with an old brush to thin out the paint, and then it will flow through the airbrush really nicely, perfectly in fact. So I'm just using that as to get some more transitions of colour, get more warmth in there. And I'm going back with the burnt umber, again same process, put a couple of drops in the airbrush with one drop of the thinner, and then just going on the very edges of the cliff face, so you can see a transition between the earth and the grass and vegetation and that kind of thing. and it just gives a much more definition, much more deeper look to the terrain, I find, than just leaving it just with blank, kind of flock and nothing else. So it's a nice way to sort of give your terrain a little bit extra depth and detail and that kind of thing to your pieces. So if you do have an airbrush, this is a great way of doing it. If you don't, you can thin out some paint on your palette and then sort of slowly and carefully dab it in over the top of the flock. And I'm using a ochre this time. Now the ochre just gives this sort of yellow and warmth to the sand as well. So as I was using the ivory and the elfic flesh before, it's a very, very white, beige color. Just adding that, just a bit of extra yellow ochre just gives a bit more warmth, and it just makes it a little bit more pleasing in the eye. And then after that, you can just dry brush it again with some ivory. And with that, guys, we've pretty much wrapped up this tutorial for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know in the comments if you did. And if you didn't, please let me know why, because feedback's really important with the series going on. So if I can make it better and more enjoyable for you, then please let me know what I can do to improve it. But here we are. Here's our finished product that we used in our games this weekend, our new little castle on a little island for Man of War. Please check out our Herohammer Fanzine, which is a free fanzine and magazine, at the link below. And also check out our other Man of War battle reports and other content on the channel. Thanks again for watching, guys. Take care. See you again next time. Bye-bye. Thank you.